Hey, you're back. Good. Tonight we're going to talk about survival, but not the dramatic kind. Not wars or famines or those horrifying leech-based medical decisions. No, this is quieter, softer. We're talking about fruit, old fruit, forgotten fruit, the kind that grew at the edge of a forest clearing or behind a thatched cottage, half wild and wholly necessary. Because medieval peasants didn't just survive on grain and guilt. They grew things, sometimes with intention, sometimes by accident, sometimes because their great-grandmother told them, "Eat this when your bones start to ache." And so they did. Let's start with our peasant guide for this round. Her name is Aldith. She lives in a little village with a name no one spells the same way twice. She has 2 children, 1 dog, and a surprisingly menacing goose. She doesn't own land, she borrows it. From the church, from the Lord, from time itself. But she does have a small patch of soil behind her cottage, and in that patch, she grows fruit. Not the shiny kind you'd see in a noble's kitchen. No grapes spilling out of silver bowls. No polished apples arranged for aesthetic. Just humble, ugly fruit that keeps her alive through the hungry months. You know what she grows? Medlar. It's a fruit that looks like it's halfway to rotting, even before you pick it. People used to call it open arse. Yes, that's the real name because it kind of resembles, well, you can imagine. It's hard, bitter, completely inedible until it starts to decay. You have to let it blet, which is a medieval word that basically means sit around until it's squishy and suspicious. Then, and only then, can you eat it. And it's delicious, like spiced apple jam, with just a whisper of fermented regret. Aldith loves medlar season. Not because it's glamorous, but because it means there's something sweet in the middle of the cold. Something earned, something that teaches patience. You don't rush a medlar. You wait. And then you eat it slowly, with your fingers leaning over a cracked bowl while your kids fight over the last one. Then there's sloes, little black wild plums that grow on spiky bushes, that seem personally offended by your presence. Aldith gathers them in early autumn, her hands scratched, her sleeves full of thorns, muttering under her breath that these better be worth it. And they are, eventually. Because you can't eat sloes raw, unless you enjoy puckering like you've aged 10 years in 5 seconds. But mix them with honey, mash them into mash, turn them into slow wine or syrup or that thing that cured Uncle Wolf's sore throat, and they become part of your survival toolkit. These weren't snacks. These were strategies. Medieval fruit wasn't dessert. It was medicine. It was barter. It was a reason to keep going just one more day. It was the memory of sweetness in a season, with very little sweetness left. And Aldith knew where every bush grew, every hedgerow with hidden berries, every wild tree at the edge of someone else's land where she could maybe quietly harvest without being accused of theft. She knew which ones to dry, which to ferment, which to feed to the sick when they stopped eating bread. She didn't read about it. She just knew, because her mother knew. Because her grandmother bled into the same soil. These fruits didn't appear in feasts. They appeared in stories, in rituals, in the quiet moments between hardship. They were held on to, not because they were tasty, but because they were proof that life would keep returning. So if you're lying here tonight wondering how people survived before sleep apps and supplements and grocery delivery, this is how. With soft fruit pulled from tangled branches, with patience, with hands scratched and stained, with mouths full of something ugly and real and unbelievably sweet. Aldith will tell you, sometimes survival doesn't look like strength. It looks like a berry bush, stubborn and sour and still growing. Tonight, Aldith is gathering something most of us wouldn't recognize. It's small, rough-skinned, grows close to the ground and tastes complicated. It's called Cornelian cherry, though it's not a cherry, and no one named Cornelia was involved. It grows on dogwood trees that bloom like they're late to spring, their yellow blossoms sharp against the gray sky. The fruit is tart, so tart it makes your mouth forget how to behave. But Aldith knows better than to eat it raw. She lets it ripen until the skin softens and the bitterness eases, then boils it with honey and rainwater until it becomes a kind of sour jam. She stores in clay jars and guards like treasure, because this isn't for luxury. This is for when the real hunger comes. The end of winter hunger. The days when the bread is thinner, the broth is clearer, and the children start asking questions you don't want to answer. Cornelian cherries weren't famous. They didn't appear in poems or paintings, but in the mouths of peasants, they were the sharp promise of another season. A fruit that said, yes, the trees still remember how to feed you, and Aldith believed them. Then there were damsons, dark plums that hung low and stubborn on their branches, waiting for just the right chill before they'd come loose. You couldn't eat many at once. Not unless you wanted to spend the next day regretting every decision you've ever made. But cook them down, wrap them in cloth, mix them with wine, and suddenly you had something close to a cure for cough, for ache, for quiet desperation. She kept damson stones in a pouch, strung around her waist with a bit of nettle thread, not because they were beautiful, but because someone once told her they were lucky. And in her world, luck was the kind of medicine you couldn't grow, but you could carry. These fruits weren't pretty. They weren't sweet in the way we expect sweetness now. They had bite. They had edge. And that was the point. Because life wasn't sweet. Not often, but it was full of small things that tried. Things that survived when nothing else would. Things that hid in bramble and shadow and still gave back. And Aldith knew how to find them. Because when your life depends on it, you learn how to see what others forget. She taught her children too. How to tell the difference between a sloe and a poisonberry. How to test for ripeness with their tongue, not their eyes. How to dry fruit over a slow fire. How to preserve what little sugar the world offered. They weren't lessons. They were lifelines, braided into their bones. So the next time you hear the word fruit and picture something clean and bright and harmless, remember Aldith. Hands stained dark, pockets full of pits and stems, mouth curled from tartness, heart steady from knowing she's fed her family through another long dark. This is how peasants survived. With fruit you had to fight for. Aldith is up early today. Not because she wants to be. No one wakes up joyful when their bed is made of straw and their joints sound like tree bark cracking. But because this morning is dew heavy, and that means the fruit is ready, not ripe, just ready enough. Because in her world, perfect is a luxury, and edible is good enough. She pulls on her woolen shawl, still damp from yesterday's mist, and heads for the edge of the woods where the service berries grow. They don't belong to her. Technically, they don't belong to anyone. But she knows these bushes. She's known them since her hands were smaller and her worries simpler. The berries are small, dark blue, and easily missed. Not showy, not loud. They don't announce themselves like a tree full of apples, but they grow in clusters, and when you find one, you find many. They taste like a memory, part blueberry, part almond, part something older. And Aldith collects them not because she loves the flavor, but because they dry well. And dried fruit is as close to gold as a peasant can get. She threads them on string, hangs them above the fire, to wrinkle and shrink and become sweet with time. And when February comes, when everything is gray and the children are too quiet, and she's tired in a way that sleep can't fix, she'll take one down, place it on her tongue, and remember that summer once existed. That sweetness is not a myth. That's something waited all winter just to be tasted again. That's what fruit was for, peasants. Reminders. Not of luxury, but of life continuing, of flavor surviving hardship, of something soft growing in spite of everything sharp around it. Later she checks on the rowan tree near the crossroads. Most folks think it's bad luck to pick from it. Rowan is sacred, protective, touched by old spirits who don't enjoy being bothered. But Aldith knows better. You don't take much. Just a few berries, bright as blood and bitter as regret. She boils them with honey and thyme and stores the syrup in a bottle, No one touches unless they're coughing like death's already knocked. Rowan isn't for joy. Rowan is for keeping the line between sickness and survival from slipping. And still, it sits a fruit. A fruit that doesn't need to be loved to be respected. She's careful with what she picks. Careful not to take too much from one bush. Careful to leave the lowest fruit for animals, the highest for birds, and the middle for herself. Because in her world, nature isn't generous. It's watching. And if you take more than your share, it doesn't forget. Every berry she gathers is part of a conversation older than language, an agreement between land and hunger, between the wild and the weary. Aldith doesn't call it sacred. She just calls it breakfast. By now, Aldith's hands are stained, a sort of deep purple that settles into the skin, no matter how many times she rinses in the stream. It's not pretty. It's not poetic. It's just what happens when you've spent the week collecting blackthorns. Small fruit, hard as rock, tart enough to make your eyes water. But she knows what to do with them. Crush them, boil them, sweeten them, just enough. Let the bitterness live, because sometimes the bitterness is what keeps you sharp through the cold. Blackthorns are for winter, for that kind of hunger that goes past the stomach and into your bones. Aldith calls it frost hunger, the kind that makes you dream of warmth so hard you wake up sweating, the kind that makes soup feel like a miracle and dried berries feel like they were kissed by angels. The fruit she dries now, she won't eat until next season. It's for the lean weeks, when the snow is high and the bread is thin and someone says they don't feel well and nobody says what they really mean. When the world gets quiet in the wrong kind of way, she ties the berries in cloth, hangs them from the rafters, out of reach from mice, out of sight from temptation. There are crab apples too, small, sharp, angry little things that fall before they're wanted. Nobody in the village loves them, but Aldith does, because they keep, because they press well, because when everything else rots, the crab apples are still sitting there smug and sour and solid. She boils them down into vinegar, into jelly, into a brew her grandmother swore could ward off fever and curses and men who talk too loud in the morning. She picks them with care, not out of joy, out of strategy. Peasants didn't farm for pleasure. They farmed to remember they had a future. And when Aldith sets the last basket down inside the doorway, she doesn't sigh in satisfaction. She sighs because her back hurts, and she still has to grind barley and clean the hearth, and patch her son's only tunic before sunset. The fruit is survival. The work is constant. The reward is existing. But there's sweetness in that too, not in the fruit, in the knowing. The knowing that her children will have something soft to eat when the frost comes. The knowing that she's learned what to pick, when to pick it, and how to turn it into something that says, without words, we made it another year. That is what fruit meant to peasants, not indulgence, but evidence that something in the world still wanted them to live. There is one more tree Aldith visits before the frost sets in. It's not close. It's tucked along a trail where the woods forget to be polite. You only find it if you know where to look, and she knows. It's a mulberry tree, old and bent like a tired midwife. Its fruit comes late, nearly black when ripe, soft enough to bruise under your breath. And when it falls fast. You don't gather mulberries. You race them, beat the birds to them, beat the wind, beat time. She brings a cloth to catch what drops, not because she's dainty. She hasn't been dainty since the plague took her uncle and left her with 4 extra mouths to feed, but because mulberry juice stains like sin, deep, permanent, proud, the kind of purple that says, I am older than your ideas of clean. She eats one fresh. It bursts. Sweet, yes, but with that whisper of shadow in it, like something that grew near the edge of a graveyard and learned how to smile anyway. The rest she dries, crushes, mixes with oatcakes and dried nettle. It's food, yes, but it's also medicine for the spirit. Something to remind the body that not everything brown and gray is all there is. That there is still juice, still depth, still moments where your mouth forgets the hunger. She also checks on the wild strawberries near the ridge. Small things, no bigger than a fingernail. But the flavor, they taste like the idea of a strawberry, not the watered-down version sold in wooden stalls and noble kitchens. These are sharp, bright. They only exist for a few weeks and vanish like they were never there. Aldith picks them carefully, not to feed the household, just to remember what sunlight tastes like. Sometimes she thinks about planting more, making a little garden just for fruit, not for trade, not for storage, just to walk through, just to know it's there. But she laughs at herself every time, because in her world, everything that grows has to earn its keep. There's no room for dreams unless they produce calories. Still, she leaves one patch untouched, a secret spot behind the hedgerow, a space where the strawberries can bloom and disappear and return without being picked. She never tells anyone, not even the children, because even in a world that demands everything, even in a season that gives so little, Aldith believes there should be one thing left untouched. One thing that just gets to exist. Back near the riverbank, where the soil is damp and everything smells a little like moss and old secrets, Aldith grows something most people forget ever existed. Gooseberries. Not the kind you find sugared and canned. These are stubborn, prickled, pale green or deep red depending on the season, and sour enough to make a child cry if they eat one too early, which of course they always do. She picks them with her sleeves pulled low. The thorns bite, but not as bad as winter does. She gathers them in silence. Gooseberries aren't celebratory. They are practical. The kind of fruit you mix with things to make them better. The kind that turns into vinegar. The kind you boil into a thick jam and spoon into the mouths of the sick when they stop asking for food. Gooseberries are not romantic, but they keep people alive. That's what most peasant fruit was. Not comfort, not joy, just a thread that held things together. A tart little reminder that the earth still had some sympathy for the poor. There's also elderberries, clustered like dark pearls on red stems, drooping low from trees that look like they've seen too much. Aldith knows not to eat them raw. That way lies stomach aches and regret. But boil them with spice, strain out the seeds, and suddenly you have something powerful. Something you sip when the fever comes. Something you mix with honey when the cough won't stop. Something that tastes like warmth and warning. The village healer keeps elderberry syrup in a dusty bottle on the shelf, but Aldith prefers hers fresh. She makes a new batch every year, even if no one is sick yet. It's her way of telling the illness, I see you coming, I am not afraid. She does the same with hawthorn berries. Small, bright, mostly pit, but boil them slow and they turn into a thick red paste that strengthens the heart, or so the old women say. She believes them. She has to. When medicine is out of reach, belief is half the cure. Hawthorns line the road to the church. People pass them without looking, but Aldith stops. Always. She thanks the tree, even if it never answers, because to her these plants are not background, they're companions. Quiet, growing proof that survival isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just a slow gathering of small things, things that feed you when nothing else will. Sometimes Aldith finds fruit by accident, not planted, not planned, just waiting. Like the bullace, a wild cousin of the plum that grows near the border of the woods, where the soil turns mean and the trees stop being polite. The fruit looks like something that should not be eaten. Rough, blue-black, skin stretched tight over sour flesh. But when the frost hits it, when the chill softens the edge, the bullace becomes something sweet that earned it. She picks them late in the season, alone, no basket, just her apron pulled up, the hem stained purple before she's halfway home. She boils them with mint, if she has any. If not, she just stews them down into paste, Nothing fancy, but enough. Something to smear on barley bread when the days are gray, and the mood in the cottage turns heavy. The fruit is not the point. The fact that it came at all, that is the miracle. She remembers a patch of cloudberries from her childhood, high ground, rare, amber-colored like drops of old sunlight trapped in fruit skin. She has not seen them in years, but she dreams of them sometimes. Dreams of the way they tasted like honey, like moss, like the word maybe. Her mother used to save them for injuries, for fear, for when the body had been through too much and needed sweetness to remind it was still a body worth keeping. Aldith has never found that patch again. Maybe it was never really there. Maybe some fruit is just a memory the forest gives you when you need it. And then there's rose hips, bright red and sharp with seed, hanging heavy after the flowers die. No one wants them at first. They look like leftover decoration. But dry them, crush them, steep them long, and they make tea that heals, tea that warms, tea that makes the air feel softer even when the wind howls through the gaps in the walls. Aldith harvests them late. After the first cold snap, she walks the hedgerow with numb fingers and tired eyes, humming the same tune her grandmother used to sing when they picked them together. No one remembers the words, just the sound, the rhythm, the part that lives in your bones. That is what these fruits are, not just food. Memory you can hold in your hand, and when the world feels too empty, she boils them just to smell them, just to fill the house with something that says this place is lived in, this body is still here, this life still has sweetness tucked into its corners. Some fruits didn't grow from seeds. They grew from ritual, from habit, from the silent agreement between peasant and land that said, if I care for you, maybe you'll feed me. Not because you owe me, but because we are both still here. Aldith tends a line of barberry bushes behind the cottage, sharp things, covered in thorns that seem personally offended by her presence. The berries are small, red, tart enough to make her teeth ache, but they are rich in something no one can name. When the children grow pale in winter, when the fever creeps behind their eyes, she makes barberry broth. No recipe, just instinct, a little bark, a little vinegar, a handful of berries that sting the tongue and wake the spirit. People say they're too sour to bother with, but Aldith knows better. Some things are not meant to be sweet. Some things are meant to fight for you. Then there are the fruits no one talks about. The ones that grow along the ditches, along the graves, along the places where the earth remembers pain. Wayfaring tree berries, dark red, almost black, poisonous when raw, but boil them just right, mix with flour, turn them into cakes, so bitter they demand your respect, and they become food for when nothing else is left. She has only made them once. The winter her sister died, the year the snow came early and left late. She did not like the taste, but she liked that it filled her, that it shut the hunger up long enough for grief to breathe. She has not made them since, but she remembers. Every fruit has a story like that. A season, a loss, a season, a loss, a lesson. These are not fruits with names people write in books. These are fruits that get passed down through hands and dirt and silence. Aldith's favorite? A small thing, a personal thing. Wild cherries found in a gnarled tree behind the abandoned mill. No one else picks them. Too bitter, too hard to reach. But she likes their defiance. She likes that they ripen quietly, that they don't try to please, that they fall when they are ready, not when they are told. She picks a few every year, drays the pits, keeps them in a little pouch near her bed, not for luck, not for tradition, just because they remind her she is not the first to survive something like this, and she won't be the last. The thing about fruit in Aldith's world is that it wasn't just grown, it was guarded, not with locks, not with walls, but with memory, with knowledge passed like seeds between hands, between generations, between years that tried their hardest to forget. Because fruit like this, the kind that feeds you when the world looks away, does not survive on sunlight alone. It survives on people like her who remember where it grows even after it has vanished from everyone else's mind. Some of the fruit she grows was never meant to be planted, like sea buckthorn, a brutal thorn-laced bush that clings to riverbanks and seems to prefer suffering. Its berries are a shock of orange, almost glowing against the gray. They look poisonous, and in a way they are. Eat too many raw and you'll regret it. But Aldith knows how to press them, how to strain them, how to mix them with warmth and honey, and time until they become sunshine in a spoon. She gives it to her children in winter when the light disappears from their eyes. She gives it to herself on mornings when the sky feels too heavy to speak under. It's not pleasant, but it brings color back to the body, and sometimes that is all you need. Not all fruit came from bushes or trees. Some grew low, secret, hidden in the folds of wild space, like wood sorrel, not a fruit by the strictest name, but the peasants never cared about categories. If it fed you, if it nourished, if it gave the mouth a break from bland and bitter, it was fruit enough. The small green leaves tasted like lemons, sharp and clean. The seed pods had a snap to them. Aldith would pluck a few on long walks, tuck them behind her ear, let her daughter chew them when she started to wilt in the sun. They never stored well. They were meant to be eaten in that exact moment, fresh from the earth, stolen from a patch of moss no one else noticed. And that made them feel precious. Not because they were rare, but because they were temporary. And in a world where hardship was constant, anything temporary and sweet was sacred. Aldith once spent an entire summer tending a wild patch of cranberries that grew in the low marsh. Not for sale, not for praise, just because they survived where nothing else did. And she liked the idea that some sweetness belonged to the unwanted places. She harvested them barefoot, knee-deep in mud, fingers stained and frozen. People said she was foolish. She said nothing. Because when the frost came and the stew ran thin, it was her cranberry preserve that kept the cough at bay, that eased the fever, that gave her neighbor one more week with her son. And no one called her foolish after that. Even now, Aldith dreams of starting over, of taking seeds from these fruits, hiding them in cloth, moving to a patch of land no one claims, and growing something that never forgets the poor. She would plant hedges of fruit, not for beauty, but for survival. Black currants, dog rose, wild pear, things that don't ask for much, things that give more than they take, things that bloom without applause and feed people who no one is watching. Because that is what these fruits have taught her. That growth does not need permission. That sweetness can come from struggle. That flavor can hide in thorns. And that life does not always taste good, but it can taste real. Sometimes she walks the edge of her field at dusk, watching the sun sink behind the trees, thinking of all the fruit she never found, all the flavors lost to time, all the seeds carried off by birds or buried by frost. And still she believes they are out there, waiting, sleeping in the soil, ready to grow again if someone someday remembers how to look. There is a rhythm to harvesting fruit that most people never learn, a kind of listening. You do not just take, you wait, you watch. You know which berries bruise if you look at them wrong, which trees only drop their fruit if the wind asks nicely, which bushes sting harder if you pick without thanking them first. Aldith knows, not because someone taught her in words, but because the land teaches in repetition, in scars and sweetness, in hunger and survival. This evening she is at the edge of the wood where the bird cherries grow. They are not the cherries you dream about. They are tiny, bitter, dark like ink, and they arrive quietly without fanfare. Most people do not pick them. The bark is too strong, the taste too strange. But Aldith knows they have power. She brews them into tonic. She soaks them in weak spirits until the bitterness dissolves into warmth. She uses them for the old woman who coughs through the night. She uses them for herself when the nights are too long and the ache in her knees feels like it will never leave. Bird cherries are not for joy. They are for endurance. She walks back slowly. The sun is low, but there is still work to do. She checks the wild pear tree by the fence. Its fruit is rock hard, more stone than flesh, but she does not complain. She will roast them, mash them, cook them until they give up their secrets. She will mix them with vinegar, with grain, with dried herbs that smell like memory. And she will feed them to her children when the snow keeps them in and the cold makes them quiet. In a corner of her mind, she remembers a story about a tree that grew fruit only when it was spoken to kindly. She does not believe it, not really, but still, she speaks softly to her trees, just in case, just in hope. Then, there are the fruits she does not gather anymore, not because she forgot, but because she no longer needs them the way she once did. Like the Gelder rose, bright red clusters that look beautiful and taste like regret. Aldith used to boil them with ash and salt to make a paste for the dying. She remembers the way it smelled, the way it stained her fingers, the way her sister would cry if she was forced to eat it. She has not picked those berries in years, but she knows where they grow, and she leaves them untouched, a kind of memorial, a way of saying that some fruit is meant to stay bitter. At night, she lies in bed and listens to the wind move through the orchard. The walls are thin. The air is cold. Her back aches in places that do not have names, but she sleeps with the sound of fruit trees breathing, with the scent of dried berries in jars above her head, with the quiet knowledge that no one went hungry today. And that is enough. Aldith dreams in flavors, not grand ones, not sugar-soaked feasts or golden pears from royal tables. Her dreams are made of shade-grown berries, of wild stems, of things that stain the fingers and cling to the edge of memory. And there is one fruit that always returns to her when she sleeps: the spindle tree. Not truly a fruit tree, not really safe. But it grows bright pink capsules that split open to reveal glowing orange seeds like tiny flames. You cannot eat them raw. You should not eat them at all. But Aldith remembers a healer who dried the seeds, ground them with other things, made salves that drew poison from wounds and bitterness from fever. She never uses them now. But the sight of those trees, burning like small lanterns along the hedge, always makes her stop, makes her remember that not every fruit is for feeding. Some are just meant to warn, or to remind you that beauty can grow in dangerous shapes. And then there are fruits that feed in silence, like currants, black, red, golden, each with its own temper, each with its own time. Aldith tends 3 bushes behind her house, planted so long ago she no longer remembers who first broke the soil. The black currants are heavy with scent, sharp with memory. She brews them into syrup thick enough to coat the back of the throat, not for sweetness, for protection. Against cough, against chill, against despair. The red ones she strings together like beads, hangs them over the hearth to dry. Her daughter calls them fireberries. They crackle when chewed, tart and cheerful. The gold ones are rare, fragile. They do not grow every year. She saves them for the baby, mixed into porridge, like a blessing stirred into the morning. These are not luxuries, they are anchors. In late summer, she climbs a small hill beyond the fields to check on the wild plums. They are knotted things, tough, scattered. The tree only fruits when it feels like it, but when it does, the plums fall all at once, sudden and generous, as if the tree is remembering something kind. Aldith fills her apron, walks home with her arms full, her jaw clenched from the sour bite of the first one. She stews them down, adds nothing, just fire and time. The flesh softens, the sharpness fades. What is left is something like survival, sweetened by suffering. And when the village gathers, if they ever do, she brings a jar. No label, no story, just the fruit, thick and dark and quiet. She does not ask for praise. She does not speak. She just places it on the table, and people eat. And for a moment they remember what it means to be fed by something old, something real, something grown by hands that do not expect to be thanked. There is one fruit Aldith never picks with a full heart: the crabapple, small, misshapen, hard enough to bruise a tooth. It grows on gnarled trees that have seen too many winters and not enough thanks. Most in the village ignore them. They think the fruit is not worth the effort, too sharp, too dry, too poor. But Aldith knows better, because crapples are honest. They do not pretend to be sweet. They do not offer ease. But if you work with them, boil them slow, press them down, coax the pectin from the pulp with patience, they will hold things together. She makes jelly from them, clear as amber, and twice as stubborn. No feast, no matter how thin, feels complete without that one spoonful, not because it makes the meal grand, but because it makes it feel like it mattered. Crabapples do not give flavor freely. You have to earn it. On colder days, she walks the old path behind the mill and checks for wild rose hips. She has picked thousands. Every year she tells herself it will be the last, that her hands have stiffened too much, that the thorns have grown too cruel. But when she sees the red bulbs hanging like blood drops against the pale sky, she knows she will pick them again, because rose hips are not just fruit. They are promises. They are vitamin and memory, and the scent of her mother drying them on the windowsill in a time when everything felt more fragile. She makes tea from them. Strong, slightly bitter. The kind of tea that makes you feel warmer even before the cup touches your lips. That kind of heat is not from fire, it is from continuity. Then, there is the rowan tree, always watching, always still. Its berries hang in bright red clusters, beautiful and bitter. The birds love them. The people fear them. Old stories say they protect the home, that if you plant a rowan by the door, evil will turn back. Aldith does not believe in curses, but she brews the berries all the same, stews them into dark sauces for meat, presses them into wine that tastes like warning. And on the days when the sky turns the color of stone, she sits beneath the rowan and rests her spine against the trunk. She says nothing, asks nothing, just listens. The leaves whisper things she cannot name. The fruit hangs like watching eyes, and she thinks maybe the tree remembers her. Maybe it has seen her enough times that it knows she is not just taking, she is returning something too. Not all fruits were born from land. Some came from water, like the elderberries she harvests near the stream, growing from trees with roots sunk deep into riverbed mud. She waits until the berries droop low and the purple stains the grass. She wears gloves. Elderberries must be handled with care. Eaten raw, they make the belly turn, but cooked they become medicine thick with shadow, a cough cure, a sleep syrup, a warmth for when the cold settles into the bones like old guilt. She stores them in dark glass, keeps them on the highest shelf, only brings them down when the night feels longer than it should. And in those moments, when her hands tremble, when the world feels too wide and her body feels too used, she sips one spoonful and remembers this sweetness was not given, it was worked for. And that makes it holy. There is one kind of fruit Aldith never picks from a branch. She picks it from the ground, from the place where trees have dropped what they no longer need, what they can no longer hold. Windfall fruit, battered, bruised, touched by worms or cracked from the fall. Most people step over them, but Aldith sees them for what they are: unclaimed blessings, fruit that has already surrendered, already softened. She lifts them gently, checking each one. Some will rot, some will be boiled, some will be eaten before she even makes it home. Windfall apples go into her pot first. Not for pies, for cider, the rough kind. The kind that fizzes in your mouth and tastes like honesty. She does not drink much. But when the snow stacks up outside and the wind hisses through the roof beams, a cup of cider in her hand reminds her that not all comfort is earned by coin. Some comes from bruised things, from broken skins, from fruit that no one wanted until it fell. Then there are the quince trees, just two of them, hidden behind the goat shed, gnarled into crooked shapes that look more like caution than invitation. The fruit is golden when ripe, hard as bone, fragrant like something out of an old memory. You cannot eat quince raw. It lies to the mouth. It dares you. But cook it down, let it surrender in sugar and heat, and it becomes something entirely different. Rosy, delicate, almost floral. Aldith makes quince paste once a year. Small batches, kept in cloth, stored for moments when something special is needed, when a guest arrives with grief in their eyes, or when a child looks too thin for the season. That kind of fruit does not feed the belly, it feeds the soul. She also keeps an eye on damson plums. They grow wild near the path to the river, tiny, dark, moody things. The trees are stingy. Some years they fruit, some years they sulk. But when they give in handfuls. Aldith gathers them quickly, before the birds strip the branches. She does not wash them. She boils them straight, with skins and pits and all. What comes out is sharp and thick, the color of bruises, the flavor of strength. She spreads it on bread, if there is bread. She stirs it into stews, if there is meat. She feeds it to her son when he looks too quiet, when the cold steals color from his face. And she thanks the tree, not aloud, just with her presence, her care, her return. These fruits, quince, damson, windfall, they are not beautiful. They are not what the lords would keep in silver bowls. They are what peasants learn to cherish, because they teach you something sweet can come from patience, from damage, from what the world throws away. And Aldith, with her hands stained and her back bent and her pockets full of seeds, knows this better than anyone. The fruits we forget are the ones that kept us alive. Some fruits you do not pick for food. You pick them for memory, for tradition, for the way they connect you to people who are long gone but never fully left. Aldith walks into the woods one morning with her basket empty and her mind full. Not of lists, not of tasks, just names. Old ones. People who once walked this same path in the same season for the same fruit. She is looking for wayfaring berries. They grow on scraggly bushes with leaves that smell like dust and bark. The berries are small, red, clustered like beads on forgotten rosaries. No one eats them fresh. They are too bitter, too dry, but if you boil them, add grain, dry them into cakes, they can keep the hunger away. Not forever, just long enough. Wayfaring berries were famine fruit, the kind of food you make when the earth has turned its back. Aldith does not need them this year, not yet, but she picks a few anyway, tucks them into a pouch with the reverence of someone folding a note from the dead, because you never know, because you honor the things that kept your people breathing. Nearby, the dog Rose's hips are ripening, bigger than most, plumper. The rain was good this year. The bushes are heavy with fruit, and the thorns bite a little less than usual, like they're tired too. Aldith fills half her basket with them. These are not for decoration, not for tea. These are for syrup, thick, medicinal, glowing red like the last light of a fire. She will simmer them slow, strain them 3 times, mix with honey, bottle it in reused jars with chipped mouths. She will keep it for when the fevers come, for when a child cannot stop coughing, for when her own chest tightens and her bones hum with cold. Rose hip syrup is not comfort, it is defiance in a jar. On her way home she checks the old sloe bush. Still green, still hard, but almost ready. Sloes are fruit that make you wait. You cannot rush them. Pick them too soon and they punish you. But when the frost kisses them, when the skin puckers and the bitterness gives way, you get something special, something that tastes like you earned it. She will make sloe gin, not for drinking, but for barter, for healing, for preserving. The color will be rich, the flavor deep. She will open it in February when the light has given up and the snow makes silence feel heavier than usual. At home, she lays the fruit out on cloth, one by one, not because she has time, but because they deserve it. Each one a story, a survival, a lesson. Because this fruit is not just nourishment, it is proof that even the things the world forgot are still growing, still giving, still holding us up in small, sour, miraculous ways. There is one last fruit Aldith keeps close, not for its taste, not for its value, for its stubbornness. It grows from the blackthorn bush, a tangle of thorns and shadow that lines the edge of the commons like a warning. The fruit is called a sloe, and it is bitter, puckering, astringent. Pick one too early, and it will dry your mouth like chalk. But wait for the first frost. Wait until the night air has cracked it open with cold, and suddenly it softens. Suddenly it becomes something you can work with. That is the lesson of the sloe. Bitterness does not mean failure. Sometimes it means readiness is coming, just not yet. Aldith knows this, has lived it. There were years where she felt like that fruit, hard, untouched, bitter for a reason. But the cold changed her too. The seasons taught her that softness is not weakness. It is what follows survival. She picks the sloes gently, even though the thorns tear her sleeves. She brings them home in silence, rinses them in cold water that smells of iron, pricks them with a needle one by one, drops them into jars with handfuls of crushed herbs and the rough gin she trades eggs to get. It will not be touched until midwinter, when things are at their quietest, when hope tastes like spice and sharpness. She calls it fire fruit. She drinks it slow. Then there are juniper berries. Not true fruit in the way people understand it, but to Aldith they count. Blue, powdered, resinous. They grow on evergreen shrubs near the stone circle where no one plants anymore. The air smells different there. Older. She gathers the berries with respect, not for eating, for preserving meat, for medicines that need a bite, for keeping hunger from turning sacred things hollow. Juniper is not sweet. It is survival dressed as flavor, and when she crushes it with mortar and stone, the smell fills the house like a warning, like an offering. At the end of the season, she wraps everything in linen, stores the jars, binds the herbs, labels nothing. She remembers what each one is by weight, by color, by scent. Because this knowledge was never meant for shelves, it lives in her hands. And as the last leaves fall, as the sky turns the color of soot, Aldith walks out to her hedge. Her fingers brush the branches. Her feet crush berries into soil. She speaks no words, but the land hears her anyway. It always has. Because these fruits, sour, strange, stubborn, were never forgotten. Not by her, not by the hunger. They were just waiting. Some days Aldith does not pick anything. Some days she walks the orchard and the wild edges just to look, to see what has returned, to see what did not. She calls it her counting ritual, not of numbers, of presences, of absences, of places where something used to grow and maybe still does in secret waiting. She stands in front of the old elder tree near the well. Its trunk is hollow in places, like it was made to be leaned against. The berries are gone now, taken by birds or time, but the scent of them still lingers in the bark. She runs her hand over the rough skin of the tree and thinks of all the nights she boiled elderberry syrup for someone she loved. All the times it helped, and all the times it did not. Some fruit heals, some fruit witnesses. That is enough. She walks further, to the patch where the brambles grow unchecked. Blackberries, wild and heavy, thorned like they resent being picked. She remembers the first time she brought her youngest there, the way his eyes widened at the size of the berries, the way his fingers came back bleeding, the way he laughed anyway. Brambles give you sweetness, but not without cost. And Aldith respects that. Anything too easy spoils the soul. The blackberries are gone now, season past, but the vines remain, twisted, waiting for another year. She touches one, lets it catch her sleeve. Does not pull away, just lets it remind her that even pain has its harvest. In the distance, she sees a flicker of red. She knows what it is before she reaches it. A wilding apple. The kind that was not planted, not planned, born from seed dropped by bird or beast or wind. The fruit is smaller than a coin, misshapen, dense. But she picks it anyway, bites into it, flinches at the tartness, smiles through it. These apples are orphans, not claimed by orchard or owner, but they grow anyway, and that makes them holy. She brings a handful home, adds them to the pot with the rose hips and vinegar, a sour tonic, a bitter reminder, a drink that says the land will give, if you are willing to meet it where it hurts. That night, as the wind returns and the house settles into creaks and soft groans, Aldith places the last jar on the shelf. She does not label it. She knows what it is by the sound it made as it cooled, by the weight, by the color. This one is for illness, or sorrow, or both. In her world, they often arrive together. The fruit may be gone from the branches, but it lives here now, in glass, in memory, in the breath that comes easier after one small, sharp sip. The seasons have shifted. The wind smells different now, not sharp, not yet frozen, but watchful. The kind of cold that sits just beneath the ground waiting for its moment. Aldith feels it in her hands, in her spine, in the way her breath stays longer in the air. The fruit is almost done, not gone, but quieter, retreating back into stem and bark and root. And so she begins her other ritual, the one that comes after harvest, the one that does not feed the body but feeds the knowing. She sharpens her knife, not for cutting, for grafting, because now is when she begins to shape next season. The old trees have given what they could. Some need to be helped. Some need to be remembered. And so, Aldith walks among them with slivers of other trees, wrapped in damp cloth and string, cut from hedgerows, borrowed from friends, given as gifts from those who remember when her table was the only one still full. She presses scion to branch, wraps them tight, speaks no spell, just breathes. Because grafting is not magic, but it feels like a promise. Near the edge of her land, where the soil is tired and nothing grows without effort, she plants something new, not from a nursery, not from a market, but from a single pit she kept in her apron for 3 seasons. A wild plum, darker than night, bitter as truth. It has no name, only a shape, only the memory of taste. She does not know if it will take, but she plants it anyway, waters it with ash and silence, because hope in her world does not arrive with drums. It arrives in pits and frost and waiting. Inside she checks her jars, not by list, by rhythm. She taps the lids, weighs them in her hand. Some she opens and stirs, watching how the syrup clings to the spoon. These are not just preserves, they are reminders of survival. Each one a season in a bottle, a moment she refused to go without, a memory sealed in sweetness or brine or something close to both. She takes a spoonful of black currant syrup, the one she saved from midsummer, thick, dark, sharp as old laughter. She lets it sit on her tongue, feels the heat in her chest. It is not a treat, it is a reckoning, a way to say, I lived through that, and I carried something out with me. The fire crackles low. The house smells like berries and smoke and wool. Outside, the frost finally begins to show itself on the windows. Thin lacework, careful, beautiful in the way that cold things sometimes are. Aldith does not fear it. She has what she needs. The ground has hardened, not frozen, not yet, but close. Aldith feels it in the soles of her feet, even through leather. She walks the orchard anyway, not to pick, not to gather, to check, because every tree is someone she speaks to, even when there is nothing to say. She brushes her hand along the bark of the old medlar tree, the one that still leans a little more each year, like it's tired of standing. It gave fruit this year. Strange, stubborn, foul-looking fruit that had to be bledded before it could be eaten. And she loved it for that, for demanding patience, for rewarding those who know how to wait. She looks up into the branches. No fruit now, just memory. But that is enough. There is one tree she has not visited in weeks. The wild pear near the western edge of the field. The fruit it gave was barely edible, rock hard, shaped like a mistake, but cooked with vinegar and clove, it turned into something that sat deep in the stomach and kept the cold out. She walks to it now, passing through grass that has yellowed and folded down. The wind is quiet. The clouds hang low, but they do not speak. She places a hand on the trunk, feels the cold in it, feels how still it is. The fruit is gone, but the promise remains. That next year, if the weather is kind, if the frost stays in the sky instead of the roots, it will bear again. Back in her cottage, she opens the cloth sack that holds her dried rose hips. They crackle faintly when touched. She smiles. These will be ground into powder, mixed with flour, folded into the bread she bakes on feast days. Not to impress, just to remember sweetness while chewing something honest. She thinks of her mother. How she used to boil quince skins with honey until the whole room smelled like hope. How she kept dried barberries in the corner cupboard for days when the stomach turned sour. How she told Aldith again and again that some fruits were not for eating. Some were for healing the idea of hunger. That is what so much of this has become. Not just food, but ritual. The act of preparing something with care even when the world is unkind. The act of saying, "This matters. I matter. Even now. Even here." Later, Aldith lights a small fire, adds a handful of dried juniper to the flame. The smoke curls upward sharp and clean, cutting through the weight of the room. She does not pray. She just listens. To the pop of sap, to the creak of wood, to the sound of her own breath settling into the night. She does not need more fruit. Not tonight. She needs only what she has already gathered, what she has already saved, what she has already become. Because Aldith is a harvest in human shape, and even now she is still feeding the future. There is something Aldith keeps that no one knows about. Not fruit, not bark, not something she can eat or trade or turn into syrup, just seeds. A little bundle wrapped in old linen, tied with blue thread, hidden in the corner of her chest, beneath a patch of dry wool and a stone that used to sit in her mother's hand. The seeds are small, black, some round, some flat, some she cannot name anymore. The memory of them was passed down without labels, only stories. This one grows near the marsh. That one blooms late but feeds early. This one can survive 2 winters in soil before it wakes up again. She runs her fingers over the cloth, not to open it, just to know it is still there. These are not for now, these are for after. In the hearth, something shifts. A log collapses, sending sparks up into the chimney. Aldith does not look up. She knows the sound, just as she knows the scent of drying damson, the slow, sugar-heavy scent of preserved strength. She stirred that pot herself, 2 days ago, added cloves. Let it thicken without rushing. There is a jar cooling by the window, covered with waxed cloth, weighted by a river stone. It will sit there all winter, maybe longer, maybe forever. Some jars are not for opening. Some are just meant to say I was here, and I prepared for what might come. Outside, the frost hardens. The grass has gone brittle. The trees have stiffened, and still somewhere beneath the soil, the roots remember the sweetness they held. Fruit is not just what grows. It is what remains, what dreams, what waits. Aldith checks the shelf near her bed, touches the bottles by weight. She does not read. She does not need to. Each one tells its story by how it leans, how it smells, how long it takes to let go of the spoon. She chooses a thick red one, rowan and honey. A little bitterness, a little light, She pours a spoonful into a cup of hot water and drinks slow, her lips touching the rim like it might whisper back. The warmth spreads slow, not fast, not sharp, just steady, and she closes her eyes, just for a moment, not to sleep, not yet, just to feel. Because this is the real fruit, the quiet after the storm, the body still alive after another season, the taste of something that outlasted the cold. She thinks about the tree in the far corner, the spindle, bright berries, poisonous, unless boiled, dried, warned. She planted it for color, for beauty, for danger. Sometimes the most important plants are the ones you do not eat, the ones that remind you that the world is still wild, still untamed, still watching. She dreams of planting more, of filling the edges of the land with things no one else bothers to grow, not for fame, not even for family, just for continuity, because someone will come next, and they will need sweetness too. Aldith smiles, sets down her cup, and lets the fire do what it does best, burn without asking for applause. There is a sound that means the season has truly ended, not the wind, not the crows. It's the sound of the last jar sealing shut, the little pop of air leaving, the final breath of a harvest held in glass. Aldith hears it in the morning before the sun is up, while the sky is still the color of cold pewter, one soft sound. That is all. And she nods to herself, as if the land just closed its eyes for the year. She moves slower now, not because she is weak, because the rush is gone, the gathering is over. Now comes the season of keeping, of watching, of waiting without worry. She spends her days near the hearth, sorting dried berries by feel. Some will be ground into paste, some steeped into vinegar, some sewn into pouches with lavender to hang near the bed when sleep grows thin. She does not count them. She does not need to. Her hands know the weight of enough. In a small clay dish, she keeps a mix of ground rose hip and ash bark, a powder for teas, for sores, for long nights. She adds a pinch to hot water and watches it swirl. It smells like silence, like time, like the rooms she grew up in. Her mother used to say it was a poor woman's gold, not because it sparkled, because it stayed. She thinks of the mulberries again, the ones that dropped too early, the ones she crushed beneath her feet without meaning to. Even the fruit that did not make it into jars still gave something, color to the soles of her shoes. A trail to follow back to the tree. Outside, frost glazes the branches. The bushes are bare, but she does not call it empty. She calls it resting, and she means it. There is a kind of richness in knowing when not to take, when to let the land be quiet, when to look at a bare bramble and still see the blackberries curled in memory. That is what makes Aldith who she is. Not just the fruit she gathers, but the fruit she leaves. At night, she adds a sprig of dried hawthorn to the fire. The flames crack and hiss. The room fills with the scent of late summer and something sharp. She remembers the years she boiled those berries into thick paste, smeared onto bark, pressed into the hands of neighbors who could not keep food down. It never tasted good, but it helped. And sometimes help is not about pleasure. It is about persistence. She sits with her back to the wall, wrapped in wool, a piece of black apple leather softening on her tongue. Her eyes grow heavy, her feet warm beneath the stones. The fruit may be gone from the trees, but she carries it still, in her cupboard, in her skin, in the way her house smells when she opens the door. There is a room in Aldith's house that no one enters but her, not locked, not secret, just private in a way that only time can make something sacred. It is where she stores the jars, shelves stacked to the low ceiling, some wood, some stone, some wedged into the gaps between. Everything smells faintly of vinegar and thyme and dried fruit skins. This is not a pantry. This is a record of years that were generous, of years that were cruel, of times when the black currants came early, and times when the apples refused to ripen. Each jar is a chapter, not just of her life, but of the land speaking back. She touches one jar and remembers the thunderstorm that almost ruined the slow harvest. Another reminds her of the year her neighbor passed, and no one spoke for days. One jar still has a faded ribbon tied around its neck, a gift for someone who never came to collect it. She does not organize them by date. She organizes them by memory, by use. This one for sore throats. That one for grief. This one for moments when the fire burns low and the body forgets how to rest. In the corner, there are bundles of dried gooseberries, strung together like beads. She lifts one strand, rubs her thumb over the skin of the fruit. It crackles, still good, still holding on. She grinds a few into powder and mixes it with barley flour, adds water, a pinch of salt, bakes it on a flat stone until it smells like patience. This is breakfast now. Not for indulgence, for continuity. Later, she steps outside, just for a moment. The cold bites quick. Her boots crunch frost. She looks at the hedgerow where the rose hips once glowed red. They are shriveled now, but the shape of them remains, like ghosts that still offer protection. Some say if you plant a dog rose near your door, no evil will cross your threshold. Aldith does not believe in evil, but she believes in boundaries held by thorns. She walks the edge of her field, passes the patch where she buried fruit scraps last spring, the peelings, the cores, the seeds. She knows the soil is working even now beneath the hard crust. Something is becoming, not ready, but becoming. And that is enough for her. At the end of the day, she returns to the fire. A new jar in her hand, elderberry and sage. She opens it just to smell, just to remember that not all sweetness lives in summer. Some sweetness waits through the dark. The snow has not come yet, but the air has changed. It no longer moves, it waits. Aldith feels it in the way her boots stick slightly to the ground each morning, in the way her breath fogs longer than it should. The land has stopped offering. Now it listens, and so does she. There is a single jar on the far shelf she has not touched in years. She made it from wild cherries the summer after her eldest was born. A strange year. Too much rain. Not enough warmth. The cherries came late and fell fast. But she gathered them anyway. Her hands were swollen from nursing. Her back ached from lack of sleep. And still she climbed the slope behind the mill and filled her apron with the small, sour fruit. She remembers boiling them in silence, the baby asleep beside the hearth. No sugar, no spice, just fruit and time. She sealed the jar and told herself she would save it for a celebration, but it was never opened. No moment ever felt worthy. Now, years later, she holds it in her hand. The glass slightly clouded, the contents still dark and whole. She does not open it now either. She just holds it like a memory you do not want to unfold too quickly. Not all fruit is meant to be eaten. She places it back, gently. In her basket today, she carries dried apple rings. They hang in long strands near the hearth until they twist slightly, like they are trying to remember what it felt like to be whole. She rehydrates a handful in a bit of hot water, then presses them between stones into cakes, food for travel, or barter, or just to remind the mouth of sweetness that does not cling. Outside, she watches a bird peck at the last of the hawthorn berries. She does not chase it off. The berries are not hers anymore. They belong to winter now, to what must endure. She gathers kindling, finds a few more fallen rose hips, too dry to store. She crushes them into the soil with her boot. Seeds will wait. They always do. At night she eats slowly, a bit of bread with black apple paste, a sip of rose tea. The meal is quiet, not solemn, just complete. And when she lies down, she places a pouch of dried herbs beneath her pillow. Lavender, gooseberry skin, a sliver of old lemon balm. It smells like her mother's voice, like the songs no one sings anymore. Aldith closes her eyes, not to forget, but to let the fruit dream through her one more night. There is something quiet that happens. In winter, Ealdith does not speak of, not because it's secret, because it's sacred. It happens in the early morning, before the light arrives. When the frost is thick on the windows, and even the fire has burned itself down to a soft red hum, she opens one of the smallest jars, a handful of preserved black currants, thickened in honey and pressed into their own shape. She places a single one on her tongue, closes her eyes and waits. It is a ritual, not for hunger, not for healing, just for remembering that sweetness still exists. The fruit melts slowly, its sharpness softened by time, its memory unfolding in waves. First summer, then fire, then breath. It is not a treat, it is a reckoning, a promise she made to herself long ago that she would carry flavor through the dark, and she has. When it is done, she returns to the jar, closes it, hides it behind the herbs. This one is not shared, not bartered. It is hers, a private preservation, a reminder that even the smallest harvest is still a form of resistance. Later, she bundles up and walks to the edge of the old orchard. The trees look skeletal now, not dead, just bare, resting with purpose. She touches the bark of the plum tree, feels how cold it has become. Underneath, she knows the roots are still alive, still holding, still waiting for the signal to rise. Aldith knows that feeling. She scatters a few dried seeds into the compost pile, not buried, just placed. A quiet offering. Maybe they will grow, maybe they will not. But planting is never about certainty, it is about participation, in time, in hope, in the idea that something soft can still grow where there was once hardship. She watches a squirrel dart along the old hedge and vanish into a thicket. She smiles. It knows where the elderberries fell. It remembers the places she left unpicked on purpose. Some fruits are meant to be shared without agreement. Inside again, she sorts her pouches, finds the one with dried service berries. A rare find, tiny, nearly forgotten. Their flavor is mild. Their value is in their memory. They are the kind of fruit that disappear from stories because they were never dramatic, just reliable, just enough. She grinds them into meal, mixes it with barley, forms small cakes for the road. Not that she is going anywhere, but you always prepare as if you might. Because to live the way Aldith does is not to hoard. It is to honor what remains. There is a shape Aldith traces in the air sometimes, with one finger just above the fire, a slow spiral, clockwise, tight at first, then wider, then gone. It is not a spell, not a sign, just a habit passed down without explanation. Her grandmother used to do the same, right before stirring a pot, right before planting seeds, right before saying nothing at all. The spiral means continue. It means begin again. It means the fruit will return even when everything else has gone quiet. Today she checks on the preserves. Not the jars, the leathers, sheets of mashed fruit, dried in the heat of late summer, now rolled and stored in old linen. She opens one, peels back the cloth, and breathes it in. Blackberry. Slowly. A little mint. It smells like a forgotten meadow, like a fire left burning somewhere out of sight. She slices it into strips and places a piece beneath her tongue. It does not melt. It holds. And slowly, slowly gives. Outside, the sky is a color she does not name. Not gray. Not blue. Something between breath and waiting. She watches it through the window, hands still stained from yesterday's root work. The apple tree is bare but not silent. Its branches move just enough to remind her that stillness is not the same as death. She reaches for a pouch near the hearth, elderflower, dried gooseberry skin, a touch of sweet flag root, crushed together into a dust that smells of heat and meadow and time. She sprinkles a pinch over the hearthstone, not for cleansing, not for blessing, just to remember how to hold space. Some fruits are gone now, not just from season, from memory. The bullace plum, the wilding cherry, the hedge-grown barberry. She says their names aloud, not to call them back, just to remind the room they mattered. And maybe, somewhere, a seed hears her. In the corner of the room sits a bundle wrapped in waxed cloth. She opens it and reveals what she almost forgot. 2 shriveled medlars, old, deep brown, soft as breath. They are past ripe, past expectation, but not past use. She crushes them into a jar, adds clove, adds vinegar, adds silence. This will be a tonic. A strange one, strong, thick, bitter like old memory, but good for clearing what should not stay. And that is what this work is. Not food, not tradition. Clearing what should not stay. Keeping what still serves. Naming what the world forgot. She hums to herself now. No words, just vibration, just rhythm. The same melody she remembers from berry picking in her youth. When the air was warmer and her hands steadier. The fruit has changed, but she has not. The cold has deepened, not sharp, just settled. The kind of cold that moves into the cracks of things, not to break them but to remind them they can still feel. Aldith moves through her home slowly now, not because she is tired but because the season asks for slowness. There is no rush in winter, only breath, only time folding into itself like dough. She checks the cloth where she laid out the last of the dried hawthorn. The berries are nearly dust now. Good, that is what she wants. She will grind them into a thick paste with honey and thyme, spread it on bark or stale bread, tuck it into pockets for days when someone cannot find their appetite. Hawthorn does not beg to be liked. It waits to be needed. In the cupboard, she finds a forgotten jar. Not from this year, 2 years ago. Maybe more. The seal still holds. Inside, quince, cooked down to its softest form. Dark rose color. Smooth. She opens it slowly. The scent rushes out like a memory she did not know she missed. Quince always surprises her. It begins hard, unloving, difficult, but give it time, give it warmth. It transforms. It becomes something you want to hold on your tongue just a little longer. She spoons out a piece and eats it without ceremony. Lets it melt. Lets it say what it came to say. Outside, the first snow begins. Just a veil, just enough to shift the sound of the world. She watches it from her doorway, wrapped in a shawl that still smells faintly of elderflower smoke. The bushes have gone still. The orchard too. But beneath that stillness, the roots are listening. The seeds are planning. And so is she. She takes a handful of dried crabapple skins and adds them to the stew pot, not for sweetness, for depth, for that edge of sour that reminds the tongue not to take comfort for granted. She stirs. She waits. She adds salt with her fingertips, not to measure but to remember. Her daughter comes in from the cold, shaking snow from her boots. Aldith hands her a slice of apple leather. The girl smiles. No words are needed. The fruit does the speaking. Tonight, she will not boil anything. She will not pick or preserve. She will sit, wrap herself in old wool, place a dried cherry in her mouth and let it soften on its own. No heat, no rush. Just time doing what time does best, turning what was once fragile into something that endures. There is a time just before sunrise when the house is warm from the last embers and cold from the stone floor at the same time. Aldith wakes then, not because she must, but because her body knows how to meet the morning without being told. She stands, wraps herself in a blanket that used to belong to her mother, and opens the window just a crack. The cold bites in, sharp, honest. She breathes it in. The orchard outside is dusted in pale frost. The branches hold still like old bones resting. No birds yet, no footprints, just the world in its first silence. She lights a single candle, not for light, for ritual. This is when she sorts the seeds, a task most leave for spring. But Aldith does not wait. She sorts now in winter because this is when the seeds speak most clearly, not in growth, but in what they survived. She lays them out on the table. Small piles, medlar, rowan, dog rose, blackthorn, each one rough, unremarkable, but she knows their stories, knows how long each one can wait in the soil before it chooses to rise again. Some wait years, some need cold to wake, some must pass through fire or storm or stomach to shed their hardness. She smiles at that. There is a lesson in every seed. Later, she makes a drink. Boiled hawthorn, honey, a single dried elderberry crushed beneath a spoon. The flavor is sharp, deep. It wraps around her chest and pulls her down into warmth. She drinks it slowly, with both hands wrapped around the cup. The girl from the village stops by. Her eyes are red. Her voice is thin. Aldith says nothing, just hands her a folded cloth, still warm from the hearth. Inside apple leather and slow syrup, bitterness and sweet, side by side. Some things do not need explaining. That evening, Aldith sits by the window again. The candle is low. The sky has turned. Snow is coming soon. Real snow. Heavy. She can feel it behind her teeth. She places her pouch of seeds back into its tin, covers it with wool, not because they are cold, because they are waiting. And waiting, to Aldith, is not stillness. It is preparation wearing silence, like a cloak. The fire settles low. She adds a few rose hips to the ash, lets them burn slow, lets the room fill with the scent of something red and old. The season has turned, but the fruit is not gone. It is only resting. The storm arrives in the middle of the night, not loud, not wild, just steady. Snow falling in thick, deliberate silence. It covers everything: roof, stone, tree, track. Even the sounds give up, trying to move. Aldith hears it more than she sees it. The way the weight of the world shifts when snow takes hold. It is a kind of stillness that demands to be listened to. She wakes early anyway. Lights no fire, makes no sound, wraps herself in wool, and stands by the door. The windows are fogged. The corners of the room hold on to the dark a little longer. She breathes in deep. This is the season where the fruit sleeps, but the memory of fruit that never leaves. She walks to the shelf and selects one jar without looking. Her hands know what they want. Quince pressed with sage and dried lemon balm, not for sweetness, for steadiness. She opens it and lets the scent rise, then closes it again. She just needed to know it was still there. That is enough. She steps outside, only for a moment. The snow crunches beneath her boots in a sound that feels older than words. The orchard is unrecognizable now. Every shape softened, every line blurred. But she knows where each tree stands, even without leaves, even without fruit. She walks a circle, just one, just to let them know she is still watching. Back inside, she stirs the fire and adds 2 dried medlar skins to the flames. They crackle, fill the air with something both sour and warm. The scent is hard to name. It smells like keeping promises. Later, she gathers the children around the table, not for a meal, for the telling. This is how they learn. Not through books, through jars, through cloth, through taste. She lays out 5 pieces of fruit leather, each from a different season. Apple, sloe, plum, rowan, black cherry. She lets them smell first, guess, then taste. Each one is a memory. Each one is a way of saying, this is what we did when there was nothing else to eat. This is what we made when the world gave us almost nothing. And we made it last. One child asks if the fruit will grow again. She smiles. Yes, she says. But only if we keep remembering how to wait. She closes the last jar, folds the cloths, leaves the room in quiet, because that is how the fruit sleeps too. The house is holding its heat now, not warm, not really, but steady. the kind of steady that comes from deep coals and careful choices. Aldith moves softly through it, her feet bare on stone, her breath slow. There is no fruit to gather, no herbs to dry, and still there is work. She lifts a small pouch from the rafters, tied with nettle string. Inside dried hawthorn blossom saved from spring. It looks like dust now, pale, fragile, but she knows what it can do. She brews a tea with it, slow and low, adds a dried sliver of apple for depth. The flavor is faint, but it holds the shape of something that once bloomed. She drinks it beside the window, watching the wind blow snow in soft spirals across the orchard. The trees are coated white now, like bone under linen. They do not sway, they do not call, but they remain. And that is the lesson she carries. Fruit is not about feast. Fruit is about return. In the afternoon, she pulls a single strip of plum leather from the cloth jar, presses it flat, cuts it into small squares and lays them by the fire. These will be carried in her coat, not for snacking, for witnessing. She gives them to people when words fail, when the cough comes back, when the cold settles too deep. One square wrapped in ash paper, placed in a palm without needing to explain. The taste tells them, yes, the world is hard. But yes, there was sweetness here once. And yes, it will come again. She writes no labels, keeps no notes. All of it is memory stored in body, not in book. She knows which bark brews well with slow, which year gave the best rose hips, which path holds the wilding pear she should visit again when the frost breaks. Aldith does not teach this with lectures. She teaches it the way fruit teaches, by being there when it matters most. At night she sharpens her pruning knife, not because she will use it soon, because it must be ready. Spring will come, the buds will swell, the frost will lift, and she will meet it again, jar by jar, seed by seed. The fire settles low, the house holds its breath, and she sleeps with the comfort of someone who has tasted the future. The snow is deep now. It muffles everything, makes the world sound like it is sleeping with both hands over its ears. Even the crows are quiet. Even the trees seem to speak only when absolutely necessary. Adilth stands in her doorway and looks out at the orchard, at the hedgerow, at the line of earth that holds every fruit she has ever picked, and every one she has ever left behind. This moment is part of the work too. She does not move, not yet. She bakes it on stone, in fire. It cracks as it rises, does not puff, does not sing, but it holds its shape. That is enough. The dough is rough, stubborn, like the season. She turns back to the table where the dried fruit skins have been laid out in little piles. Apple, quince, plum, blackthorn. She mixes them into the flour with careful hands. No recipe, just instinct, just memory. She adds ground hawthorn for the heart, ground rose hip for the blood, a bit of slow syrup for bite. Later she opens the chest where she keeps the oldest pouch, the seed pouch, the one wrapped in her mother's wool. Inside, the seeds are all mixed now. It does not matter. She will not separate them. Life will decide what wakes and when. She adds one new seed, dried from the last crabapple she gathered this year. This is not bread for guests. It is bread for the body that has done too much and still goes on. Not labeled, not special, just next. She places the pouch back in its corner, covers it, not to protect it, to give it rest. Even if it does not grow, in the evening, she eats, slowly, 2 slices of the dense bread, 1 spoon of elder syrup. Her daughter asks her if she will plant anything new next spring. Aldith nods, chewing, always. Because planting is not just about hope. It is about returning what was given. She lights no candle tonight, just lets the fire burn down, slow and sure. The house is warm from inside, and when she sleeps, she dreams of a tree she has never seen, tall, leafed, bearing fruit that glows like memory. Even then, she says, The house is quiet. The fire has burned low but not out. There is just enough light to see the curve of the jars on the shelf, the linen pouches, the bundle of twigs and dried skins hanging near the door. Everything is in its place. Everything is waiting well. Aldith moves softly through the space. Her hands do not reach for anything. They just rest at her sides, open, like empty baskets after a long summer. She is not gathering anymore, not pressing, not boiling. She is simply being. This too is part of the harvest. She lights a small taper, just one, lets it flicker beside the rowan wood spoon her grandmother carved. She sits beside it, not to pray, not to speak, just to listen to the quiet breathe around her. There is one last thing to taste. She unwraps the cloth from her private jar, the one she never shared. Dried blackberries, tough with time, glossy with syrup. She takes one between her teeth and holds it there. Does not chew, just lets the flavor open slowly like a door. It is darker now, sharper, less sweet than she remembers, and more real. That is how memory works. Not polished, not perfect, but true. She closes the jar and wraps it again. She does not need more tonight. What she needed was the reminder that even in winter, even in silence, even when everything else has fallen asleep, the fruit still waits, not on the branch, but in her, in what she kept, in what she passed on, in what still grows quietly inside. Anyone who ever tasted something small, something sour, something shaped by time, and still called it good. The snow thickens. The room dims, and Aldith sleeps, wrapped not just in wool, but in the fullness of the seasons she carried, the ones she gathered, the ones she left behind for someone else to find. And maybe, just maybe, someone listening now will walk the hedgerow in spring and find something sweet that should not have survived. And they will know it did, because someone like Aldith once held it close and let it fall back into the earth to rise again.